"Stop the wedding. She's planning to kill my dad." That sentence, shouted by an 8-year-old boy, silenced the entire church. In a split second, what was supposed to be a perfect wedding turned into an unprecedented disaster. That morning, sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of St. Gabriel Church in a small Southern California town, where no one expected a dark truth to be revealed. Everyone had gathered to witness the sacred union of Nathan Carter, a successful electronics engineer, and his beautiful bride-to-be, Vanessa Blake. She appeared in a pristine white lace gown, her blonde hair curled softly, her face perfectly made up, walking gracefully down the aisle as the guests rose to celebrate. But there was one person who didn't stand, didn't smile, and didn't look happy: Jaden Carter, Nathan's biological son, who was about to make the biggest decision of his life. Dressed in a perfectly fitted little suit, holding the ring-bearer's pillow in his arms, Jaden sat still, eyes locked on his father. He didn't cry, didn't smile, just clenched his hands so tightly they turned pale. Everyone assumed he was just a child struggling with his dad remarrying. They were wrong. Inside Jaden's mind were painful memories. Nights when Vanessa ordered him to stay quiet while his dad worked late. Her condescending remarks, her cold stares when they were alone, and most recently, the phone call she had with a man named Cameron, where Jaden overheard a plan for an unfortunate accident after the honeymoon and a $5 million life insurance policy. He had only a few days to gather evidence. He'd snuck a look at the insurance documents on Vanessa's laptop and seen photos of her in intimate poses with Cameron, the man she called Mark, over the phone. Jaden tried to warn his father, but no one believed him. No one thought an 8-year-old could understand grown-up matters. And now, as the officiant began the familiar line, "If anyone has a reason to object to this marriage, speak now or forever hold your peace," Jaden jumped to his feet, heart pounding, throat tight, but voice ringing clear. "I have a reason. Don't marry her, Dad. She's not who you think she is." The entire church went still. The photographer's camera froze midair. Vanessa turned, eyes locked on Jaden like daggers. Nathan frowned, half confused, half terrified. And Jaden, for the first time in his life, stepped forward. Under hundreds of watchful eyes, ready to tell everything, even if it meant ruining his dad's happiest day ever. Jaden remembered clearly the day his father first brought Vanessa home, an autumn afternoon bathed in golden sunlight that stretched across the neighborhood. A chilly breeze slipping through his hoodie as he stepped out of the school gate. Nathan Carter was glowing like a man newly in love. He smiled the entire drive, whistling cheerful tunes non-stop. "Dad has someone special for you to meet today," he said, eyes sparkling like a kid who just got a brand new toy. Jaden didn't reply. He stared out the window, feeling a strange unease he couldn't quite name. When they got home, the woman was already waiting on the porch, wearing a long floral dress. Her blonde hair softly curled, a smile so radiant it felt unnatural. "Jaden, so nice to meet you," she said, crouching to his level, her bright blue eyes sparkling like something out of a fairy tale. But something about her made Jaden shiver. He couldn't see anything real behind those eyes. They didn't look at him the way his mom used to. They looked like a mask. Vanessa quickly took over the house like she had always belonged there. She made tea, laughed with Nathan, occasionally turned to Jaden with a few polite questions, but Jaden could feel it whenever Nathan wasn't looking. Vanessa's gaze changed, like cold stone, like she wanted him gone. At first, the boy tried to convince himself it was just jealousy. His mom had been gone 2 years. Maybe he just wasn't ready for his dad to love someone new. But as the days passed, the doubt didn't shrink. It grew, slow and steady, like a storm building at sea. Jaden began to notice the little things. Vanessa smiled the brightest when Nathan was watching, but sighed quietly when his back was turned. She acted sweet in front of adults, but became distant, sometimes even irritated, when it was just the two of them. One night, while Nathan was working a late shift, Vanessa sat across from Jaden in the kitchen, glued to her phone, not even looking up as he excitedly told her about a space lesson at school. "Miss Vanessa, what's your favorite planet?" Jaden asked, eyes lighting up. "Can you be quiet for once?" she snapped, eyes still fixed on the screen. "Just eat. Don't bother me." Jaden froze, his spoon hanging midair. It felt like a bucket of cold water had been thrown on him. But the next morning, when Nathan came home, Vanessa was all smiles again, making pancakes for both of them. Hugging Jaden, asking how he slept. A perfect mask, but no one could see it more clearly than a child living in its shadow. Jaden grew quieter each day, more withdrawn, but he watched, he remembered, he collected every little moment that the grown-ups overlooked, until one day. Those tiny details came together like puzzle pieces, revealing the full picture of a woman who wasn't an angel, but a ghost. Slowly tightening a noose around his father's neck. And the only one who saw it was Jaden. Jaden remembered that night clearly. He had only spilled a glass of orange juice. Something completely normal for an 8-year-old. But Vanessa's reaction was anything but normal. She screamed as if he had burned the whole house down. "You useless little klutz," she hissed, her hand gripping Jaden's arm so tightly he flinched. "Look at this mess. Do you see what you've done? You always ruin everything. Like some burden?" Jaden was stunned. The pain in his arm wasn't as frightening as the hatred burning in her eyes. There was no pretending now. No sweet smile for Nathan. This was the real Vanessa. Or more accurately, this was the stranger living in his home. He stammered an apology, hands trembling as he grabbed tissues to clean up. But Vanessa wasn't done. She bent down, her voice low and venomous, like a snake sliding into his ear. "Listen, kid, if you breathe a word of what happened tonight to your dad, I swear you'll regret it. I'll make everything worse. You don't want that to happen. Trust me." Jaden froze. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just scared, he felt truly threatened. That night, Nathan came home late, carrying a box of pizza and a few jokes to share with the two of them. Vanessa was back to being an angel. She greeted him with a warm smile, told him Jaden had been such a good boy all day. Jaden just forced a smile, quietly hiding the bruise on his arm beneath his long sleeve. He knew, if he told, maybe his dad wouldn't believe him. Maybe Vanessa would retaliate. But most of all, Jaden didn't want to make his father sad. Nathan was happy, and Jaden didn't want to destroy the only piece of happiness left since his mom died. So he stayed silent. But from that night on, Jaden started watching, not just what Vanessa did, but what she tried to hide. He noticed how she looked at his dad's laptop, how she always locked the screen when Jaden walked in, how she often left the house with vague excuses, meeting a bridesmaid, adjusting the dress, talking to the planner. Jaden began keeping track of the times, remembering the small details. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for, only that something was wrong. Deeply wrong. He was only 8, but the instincts of a child forced to grow up too soon had never been wrong. One night, Jaden jolted awake from a restless dream. The clock on his nightstand blinked 11:43 p.m., its faint red glow casting shadows on the ceiling. The house was completely silent, only the ticking of the clock and a soft whistle of wind slipping through the window crack. Jaden was thirsty. He quietly slipped out of bed, barefoot in the hallway, each step on the cold wooden floor echoing like his heartbeat. But just as he passed the living room, a sound made him stop in his tracks. A voice, urgent, angry. It was Vanessa. "Mark, don't you get it? We can't rush this. Everything has to be perfect." Jaden held his breath, pressing himself against the wall, heart pounding like a drum. Mark? He'd heard that name once before, briefly. Quickly. In a deleted message. "Everything's already in place. The life insurance is finalized." "Nathan has no idea," Vanessa said, her voice cold and calculated. "We just need to get through the wedding, just a few more weeks. Then it'll look like an accident." Jaden couldn't believe what he was hearing. An accident? Insurance? They were going to kill his dad? "What about the kid?" came a man's voice from the other end of the call. "You said he's been watching you." "Jaden? He's just a child. Even if he suspects something, Nathan would never believe him. You know how it is. Love makes people blind." Jaden felt the chill run deep into his bones. He had always known something was off about Vanessa, but he never imagined it would be something this evil. He was the obstacle, the problem, the unwanted attachment, and his father, the man who had been joyfully planning his wedding, was just the target in a cold-blooded scheme. After the wedding, Vanessa continued, "Everything will be staged, a believable accident, a huge payout, and then we disappear. No more petty scams. This is our one shot to get out. Jaden didn't wait a second longer. He backed away, turned, and ran, his feet pounding down the hall. Heart racing, sweat cold on his skin. He dove under the covers. Curled up tight, hand over his mouth to stifle his ragged breathing. He knew. This wasn't just about being treated badly anymore. It wasn't about harsh words or bruises. This was murder. This was his father's life at stake. And Jaden, only 8 years old, knew he had to do something. There was just one problem. Who would believe a child? Morning sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows of a small church in San Diego, casting shimmering beams across the polished wooden pews. Guests had gathered in full, dressed to perfection, whispering joyfully with shared excitement. The air buzzed with sweet anticipation. All except for one person, Jaden. The 8-year-old boy wore a tiny suit that matched the groom's. In his hands was the ring-bearer's pillow, but his palms were slick with sweat. Jaden's eyes never left his father. Nathan Carter, the man standing at the front, overjoyed, completely unaware that the trap had already been set, waiting to snap shut. "You okay, buddy?" Nathan whispered, leaning down beside Jaden, wearing the same warm smile he always did. Jaden nodded silently. He knew he couldn't wait any longer. He had tried to tell the truth, but his father didn't believe him, didn't want to. So today, right here, Jaden would make sure they had no choice but to listen. The church doors swung open. Vanessa appeared like a vision from a dream, flowing white lace gown, perfectly curled blonde hair, a soft smile that sent chills down Jaden's spine. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Nathan held his breath as she walked toward him. But Jaden saw a wolf in sheep's clothing. The ceremony began. The priest read the opening lines. Guests fell silent, all eyes forward. In that moment, Jaden felt the world slow down, every heartbeat pounding in his ears. He knew the moment of truth was near. Then the priest spoke the words, the familiar phrase, now heavy with life and death weight. "If anyone knows any reason why these two should not be lawfully wed, speak now, or forever hold your peace." Silence. Jaden clenched the pillow tight, his heart ready to burst from his chest. He looked at his father one last time. And then, he shouted, "Stop!" The entire church froze. Heads turned. Nathan looked stunned. Vanessa flinched, but quickly regained her smile. "Jaden?" Nathan called, confused. Jaden stepped into the aisle, trembling, his voice shaky but strong. "Dad, you can't marry her. You don't know what I heard, but I heard everything. She's going to kill you." The church erupted in gasps and murmurs. What are you saying?" Nathan asked, voice low. Jaden pointed at Vanessa. "I heard her talking to someone named Mark. They have a plan. After the wedding, there's going to be an accident. They want the insurance money. I found the contract on her laptop. $5 million, if you die." Vanessa let out a high-pitched, breathless laugh. "Oh my God, what is he saying?" "Nathan, you know he's just scared. He doesn't want a stepmom." "So, I saw pictures of her with Mark." Jaden shouted through tears. "They're a couple. She doesn't love you. She loves money." Vanessa stepped forward, trying to grab Jaden, but Nathan held up a hand to stop her. His face had gone pale. "Do you have anything to say?" he asked, voice tight with emotion. The look in Vanessa's eyes changed, gentle became glaring. "How disappointing," she hissed. "You'd believe lies from a child?" Jaden stood there, panting. All eyes were on Vanessa now. No fake smile could save her. She glanced around, eyes darting rapidly. She knew she'd lost. And then, she turned, grabbed her dress, and ran. Vanessa tore through the illusion of ivory she had worn for so long, racing toward the church doors like a storm breaking loose. Her billowing wedding gown flew behind her with every frantic step, blonde hair whipping wildly. Guests gasped and parted to the sides, some raising their phones just in time to capture the chaos unlike anything they'd ever seen. Nathan stood frozen at the altar, the wedding ring still resting on the pillow in Jaden's hands, the 8-year-old boy now pale-faced, lips pressed tight in shock and exhaustion. No one in the church could speak. "Someone stop her," a voice shouted. No one knew who, but it broke the silence like shattering glass. A few older male guests rushed toward the exit, but Vanessa had already vanished beyond the stone columns at the church's front, her white train dragging behind like the trace of a guilty soul. Nathan pulled out his phone with trembling hands. His lips moved soundlessly at first. "This is 911. I need to report a crime. My fiancée, she's fleeing the scene. And I believe she was planning to murder me for insurance money." Less than 10 minutes later, 2 patrol cars pulled up in front of the church. Sirens blaring, the crowd began to part. Many guests lowering their phones. Eyes now locked on every move the officers made. "Are you Nathan Carter?" one officer asked, while the other moved inside to speak with witnesses. Nathan nodded, placing a steady hand on Jaden's shoulder. "Yes, and this is my son. He's the one who exposed everything." The officer knelt down, looking directly at Jaden. "Can you tell me everything from the beginning?" Jaden swallowed hard. He looked up at his father, who gave him an encouraging nod, and then began to speak, every word, every memory, about the insults, the arm grabbing, the threats to stay silent, about overhearing phone calls with a man named Mark, the files on the laptop, the photos of Vanessa in the arms of a strange man with a scar above his brow. The officer took notes, glancing up at Nathan with a grave expression. Then, suddenly, from the church doors, a tall man appeared. Dark hair, sun-weathered skin, and a scar etched above his left eyebrow. I'm looking for Vanessa," he said breathlessly, eyes darting across the room. Jaden recoiled instantly, eyes wide. "Dad, that's him. That's Mark." Nathan spun around. "Officer, that's him," he yelled. Officer Rivera drew his weapon instantly. "Hands up, don't move, get on the ground, now." Mark froze. For a brief second, he considered running, but before he could even turn, 2 officers had him tackled to the floor, right in front of the entire congregation. Minutes later, Mark was handcuffed and shoved into the back of a patrol car. Inside the church, Jaden sat in Nathan's arms, exhausted but with eyes brighter than ever. He had saved his father. He had saved both of their lives. "Mr. Carter," one of the officers said seriously, "we'll need you and your son to come to the station. We'll collect formal statements and examine the evidence your son provided." Nathan nodded, eyes still fixed on Jaden. "Of course, whatever it takes. And thank you for believing him." Officer Johnson offered a faint smile. "He's not just a brave kid, he's the real hero of the day." Jaden looked up at his father. "Did I do the right thing?" Nathan pulled him close, eyes misty. "You saved me, son. No one else could have done that. I'm proud of you." Jaden. Coming up, Part 7, The Interrogation. The truth revealed, and Vanessa's real identity shakes the entire city. On the way to the police station, Jaden sat between Nathan and a young officer, his face pressed quietly against the car window. Watching the familiar streets blur past like a slow-moving dream he wasn't sure he was awake for. Beside him, Nathan held his son's hand tightly, as if afraid that letting go for even a second would make it all disappear, the boy. The truth, and the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, they had escaped the nightmare. At the station, the father and son were led into a small, plain room, white walls, a wooden table, and 3 metal chairs. Officer Johnson, the same one who had been with them since the church, sat across from them. He spoke gently, never pressing, as if he understood the truth had already hurt more than enough. Jaden began to recount everything. Every word felt like broken glass that had been stuck in his mind for months. He spoke of the insults, the silencing, the threats, of the sleepless nights, hiding his fear while listening to Vanessa, or rather, her real name, whispering schemes with Mark over the phone. He told them about sneaking into her laptop, about the insurance files, the damning photos. The officer was silent for a long time after writing down the last few lines. "You're a brave kid," he finally said, voice warm. "Not many people could do what you did, especially not when facing adults that manipulative." Just a few rooms away, in the holding cell, Mark sat motionless at the table. His hands rested flat, the scar above his eyebrow furrowed along with his cold stare, but the arrogance was gone. Under the harsh white light, he was nothing more than a man stripped of every secret. The interrogation didn't take long. Under pressure and confronted with irrefutable evidence from Jaden, Mark broke quickly. He confessed everything. Vanessa's real name was Sarah Connor, a seasoned con artist with multiple fake identities and passports under different aliases. She and Mark weren't just partners in crime, they were lovers. A criminal duo who had pulled off scams across several states, targeting single fathers with young children, gaining their trust, and then destroying them from the inside. The plan with Nathan had been their boldest yet. It wasn't just about life insurance. Sarah had manipulated him into altering his will, leaving everything to her after marriage. Nathan's death was scheduled to happen during the honeymoon, disguised as an adventure accident, a skydiving mishap, a diving trip gone wrong. A young, grieving widow, Mark recalled Sarah saying, "No one would ever suspect her." When the officer finished his report, Nathan said nothing. He just lowered his head, hands clenched into fists. His eyes were red, not from anger, but heartbreak, not because he'd been fooled, but because he hadn't seen his son silently screaming for help. "How could I have been so blind?" he whispered. Jaden sat beside him, his hands still warm in his father's. He didn't blame him. He was just a child. But he understood, when people are trying to find happiness again, sometimes they miss the most important signs, like the sad eyes of a child trying to hide his fear. Mark was in custody. Sarah, however, had vanished, apparently already prepared to flee. Police issued a nationwide warrant, uploading her photo and details to the federal system. But Sarah Connor wasn't easy to find. She disappeared like smoke, as if she had never existed at all, leaving behind only a ruined wedding and an 8-year-old boy who stopped something truly horrific from happening. When Nathan and Jaden stepped out of the police station at dusk, they were no longer just a single father and his little boy. They were survivors, two people who had faced the dark and won, not with force, but with love, with trust, and with a child's courage far beyond his years. Nathan took Jaden's hand, knelt down, eyes brimming with emotion. "Jaden, thank you. You didn't just save me. You saved our whole family." Jaden simply smiled, then leaned his head gently against his father's hand. The sky turned purple, but inside their hearts, the light was breaking through. She had vanished, like a cold wisp of smoke fading into the night. No one saw Sarah Connor after the moment her white wedding dress swept through the church doors. City police, federal agents, and even the media were on the case. Sarah's face flooded the evening news, splashed across major newspapers with headlines like, "Seductive con artist and murder plot foiled by an 8-year-old boy." But she left no trace. No cameras caught her next move after leaving the church. No bank accounts were touched. No rental cars. No credit cards. No signals. She had evaporated as if she had never existed. "She's a professional ghost," Detective Johnson sighed during a briefing with Nathan's family. "No biometric records, and even her real name may be just one of many aliases. We've seen people like her, but never someone who played the part this well." For this long, Nathan was silent. He heard the words as if they were being spoken through thick glass. He wasn't afraid she'd come back, but he couldn't rest knowing she was still out there. Jaden, since the shock of the wedding day, seemed years older. He no longer played like before, no longer bombarded his dad with nightly questions about superheroes or silly riddles. In their place was a sharp, unusual alertness, an instinctive tension whenever the doorbell rang, a reflex to tighten his grip on Nathan's hand whenever they went out. Nathan noticed, and he refused to let his son live forever in the shadow of fear. A week later, they installed a full security system, 360-degree cameras, fingerprint locks, an emergency alarm linked directly to the police. But Nathan knew, no technology could guard the heart of a child carrying a wound. So he did the one thing he hadn't done before: he listened. He spent more time with Jaden. No pressure, no pushing him to act normal. Just being there. They gardened, played chess, read detective stories, and watched old home videos of Jaden's mom. And from those warm evenings, Jaden began to laugh again. Not the forced laugh of a boy trying not to worry his dad, but real, joyful laughter. Like when Nathan pretended to trip on the garden hose, or when they accidentally burned an entire batch of cookies. One afternoon, while Nathan was mowing the lawn, Jaden came running out. "Dad, I found that old book Mom used to read to me every night before bed." Nathan looked up, and in that moment, he saw in his son's eyes, not a child burdened by life or death secrets, but a little boy reclaiming his childhood. But the darkness hadn't given up. After his arrest, Mark revealed more. Sarah had used over 9 different identities in the last 6 years. Every scam followed the same blueprint: Target single fathers. Earn their trust. Drain them, and if necessary, eliminate them. She's worked in cities like Chicago, Atlanta, Seattle, but she never stayed longer than 18 months. The officer reported. She's smart, organized, extremely cautious. Then, a message arrived in the police department's anonymous inbox. The message was simple. Don't look for me. I didn't fail. I stepped back. And next time, there won't be a child to get in my way. Signed, E. The police couldn't confirm if it was her. But Nathan knew. A father's instinct told him. Sarah was still watching. She wasn't done. But this time, he was ready. That night, as Nathan tucked Jaden into bed, the boy opened his eyes and whispered, "Dad, will she come back?" Nathan paused. He leaned down, kissed Jaden's forehead, and said quietly, "Maybe. But if she does, she won't just have to face me. She'll have to face both of us." Jaden smiled, closed his eyes, and wrapped his small hand around his father's. For the first time in weeks, he slept soundly. Outside the window, warm yellow light filtered through the leaves, peaceful, yet alert. Jaden never thought he'd be a name mentioned on the evening news. But less than 2 weeks after he stood at the altar, pointing at the woman who had planned to murder his father, the 8-year-old boy appeared on every major headline. The boy who stopped a murder plot at his father's wedding. The story spread quickly across the country. Major networks like CNN, ABC, and CBS rushed to cover it. People began calling him Little Hero. Some websites even started a hashtag Justice by Jaden. Celebrities shared the story with admiration, from Hollywood actors to high-ranking politicians. But for Jaden, it was all too overwhelming. "I don't want to be famous," he whispered to his dad one night, as they watched a short interview replay on TV, the one Nathan had agreed to. Because the police said it might inspire other kids to speak up. "I just want everything to be like before. Mom's still alive, you not sad, and me, not having to think about life insurance." Nathan silently pulled his son close, feeling the weight sitting heavy on those small shoulders. "Jaden," he said gently, "you did something most adults are too scared to do. You stood up for the truth. And for someone you love. That's not about fame. That's about courage." Jaden was quiet for a moment, then looked up and asked, "Dad, are there others like me? Has anyone ever saved someone they love, even when no one believed them?" Nathan smiled, softly, deeply moved. "Yes, many. And now, because of you, more people will be brave. You didn't just save me, son. You helped others learn to listen when a child speaks." A week later, Nathan received a call from a national child protection organization. They invited father and son to Washington, D.C. to speak at a symposium on family safety and child bravery. At first, Nathan hesitated. He was afraid it would trap Jaden in the shadow of what had happened. But Jaden said, "If what I say can help another kid be believed by their parents, then I want to say it." Their trip to Washington, D.C. was the first time they'd left town since the wedding was called off. And it was also the first time Jaden stood on stage, alone. He wore a crisp white shirt, a blue bow tie, and shiny black shoes. But it was the steady look in his eyes and his composed voice that made the entire room go silent. "My name is Jaden," he began. "I'm 8 years old, and I used to be very scared. I was scared to tell the truth because I didn't want to make my dad sad. I was scared grown-ups wouldn't believe me. But I learned that if you know something is wrong, you have to say it. Even if you're shaking, even if you cry. Because real love shouldn't be a secret." The entire auditorium rose to their feet in applause. Some wiped away tears. A reporter in the back row whispered to her colleague, "This boy, he's going to change how the whole country listens to kids." Back home, Jaden no longer felt different. Each morning at school, classmates ran up to hug him. Some parents quietly told Nathan, "Your son's story made me start listening to my own child more." A few months later, Jaden received a handwritten letter from a little girl in Texas named Camilla. Just 7 years old. "Jaden," she wrote in careful cursive. "Thank you for speaking up. My mom has a new boyfriend and he's not nice to me. I told her, and because of you, she believed me. You're my hero." Jaden read that letter 3 times. Then he folded it carefully and tucked it into his secret box, where he kept his most precious things, right next to a photo of his mom and his first toy car. Nathan watched his son doodling a picture of the two of them riding a whale across the sea. A surge of indescribable pride swelling in his chest. This boy, who had once been scared, threatened, doubted, was now the one who had brought light to the darkest place. Not because he wanted to be famous, but because he knew that the truth deserves to be told. That day started like any other. The sky was clear, birds chirped outside, and Jaden was sitting in the living room reading a comic book when the doorbell rang. Nathan got up to answer it with his usual smile, assuming it was the delivery man bringing Jaden's new toy. But instead of the usual sight, stood the familiar face of a police officer. Solemn and serious. "Mr. Matthews. Officer Burns? What's going on?" The officer lowered his head, his voice gentle but heavy, as if every word he was about to speak would fall like a stone straight into Nathan's chest. "We found Sarah Connor." Nathan froze, speechless. The real name of Emily, the woman who nearly killed him, returned like a ghost. "She's dead, Nathan," the officer continued. "We found her body at a small roadside motel on the edge of Las Vegas. No signs of struggle. There was a suicide note. And a photo of you and Jaden on the table." Nathan stepped back. The wind outside the door suddenly felt colder. He didn't know what to feel. Relief? Sadness? Anger? Or all of it at once? The officer reached into his pocket and handed him a small envelope. "She left this. It's addressed to the father I once truly loved, and the boy who was right." Nathan opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. The handwriting was familiar, slender but firm, now etched with remorse. Blank. Underscore, blank. "Nathan, I have no excuse for what I did. Coming to you wasn't entirely a lie. There were moments when I believed I could change. Moments when I truly thought the love you had for Jaden might reach whatever was left of the good in me. But Mark always pulled me back, and I was too weak to escape. When Jaden told the truth, I knew I had lost. Not because the plan failed, but because a child had lived more honestly than I had my entire life. I couldn't live with the guilt. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I only hope you hold on to the one precious thing I never deserved, Jaden. Goodbye, Sarah." Nathan sat in silence for a long time. Jaden approached, clutching a plastic dinosaur in one hand, his voice trembling. "What happened, Dad?" Nathan looked at him, eyes brimming. He opened his palm, showing Jaden the letter, but didn't let him read it. He simply said, "The bad person won't bother us anymore." Jaden was quiet. After a moment, he asked, "Was she sorry?" Nathan nodded. "Yes, son, very much." Jaden said nothing more. He stepped out onto the porch, looking up at the still sky. He didn't feel happy, but he wasn't scared anymore either. Something inside him had been released. Lighter now, even if it wasn't forgiveness. The news of Sarah Connor's death once again made headlines. Special reports recounted the entire case, praised Jaden's bravery, and delivered strong messages about teaching children to protect themselves. Nathan declined all interviews. He only wanted that chapter closed. But there was one thing he didn't decline: taking Jaden to a parent-teacher conference where psychologists, educators, and families gathered to learn how to truly listen to children. They sat in silence as Jaden, now 9 years old, stood up and shared. "One time, I wanted to say something really important, but grown-ups thought I was just a kid, and didn't know anything. If I'd stayed quiet, my dad might not be here now. So today, I just want to tell all the parents sitting here, please listen to your kids like they're your best friend. Sometimes, the things that seem impossible are actually true." 1 year later, on the anniversary of his mother's passing, Nathan and Jaden brought flowers to the cemetery. Not just to remember the mother they had lost, but to permanently close the door on the past with Emily, Sarah, the woman who had almost destroyed them both. Jaden laid a bouquet of white chrysanthemums at his mother's grave, then sat quietly beside his father. "Dad," he said softly, "I think I've forgiven now. Not her, but myself, for being afraid." Nathan gently squeezed his son's hand. He didn't need to say a word, because he knew, from the moment Jaden had shouted, "Stop," at that wedding altar. His son had already become more of a man than most ever would. It was an early autumn afternoon. Yellow leaves had just begun to scatter across the backyard of a small house in suburban Atlanta. Jaden had just finished his math homework when the doorbell rang. Nathan, cooking dinner in the kitchen, called out. Jaden, can you see who it is for me? Jaden walked to the door, still holding his pencil. The familiar mailman smiled and handed him an old ivory-colored envelope with no return address, only the words. To Jaden Matthews, personal. Jaden paused. It wasn't often he got mail, especially not something marked personal. Thank you, sir, he whispered, then ran inside. Nathan wiped his hands, picked up the envelope and examined it. The return address was unclear. The postmark smudged. Maybe it's someone from the Child Protection Program, he guessed. Jaden carefully tore open the edge. Inside was a piece of ivory-colored paper, handwritten in neat blue ink. Jaden, I don't know if I have the right to write to you. But if there's ever been a moment to say thank you, this is it. You don't know me, but I know you. I was once a roommate of Sarah's at the juvenile correctional facility, the woman you were brave enough to expose. The day your story hit the news, our unit watched the segment. Many people laughed at Sarah. Some cursed her. But me, I cried. Not because I felt sorry for Sarah, but because I felt for you. You chose not to stay silent. And because of that, someone like me, someone who had lived in the dark, someone who had once been an accomplice to wrong, decided to turn themselves in and confess to things no one ever knew. You helped me realize it's never too late to do the right thing. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for saving your dad, and maybe saving people like me too. Someone you've never met, but who will never be the same because of you. Jaden finished reading, his hands slightly trembling. He looked up at his father, eyes wide, as if a new breeze had rushed into his chest. Dad, what is it, son? I didn't know. I did that much, just by telling the truth. Nathan pulled him close, his smile quiet but full of warmth. That's what brave people do. Jaden, they don't just save themselves, they awaken those who thought they were beyond saving. A few weeks later, Jaden was invited to speak at a statewide youth conference titled, Listening to the Voices of Children. He was the youngest speaker there. Jaden stepped on stage holding the nameless letter in his hand. I'm not a hero, he began, voice calm and steady. I'm just a kid who couldn't sit still knowing something was wrong. I was scared of getting in trouble, of being hated, of being called a liar. But I chose to speak. And today, someone wrote to tell me that what I did helped them turn themselves in. I might not fully understand what that means yet, but if one honest word can lead to change, then I'll never stop speaking the truth. The auditorium was silent. Then, applause broke like waves crashing into the hearts of every listener. That night, on the ride home, Nathan looked at his son, now leaning against the car window. Eyes half closed after a long day. He thought to himself, my son is no longer just a little boy. He's become a symbol of what's right, of the power of a clear, courageous heart in a world full of doubt. Jaden didn't know what lay ahead, but he knew one thing for sure. He would keep walking forward, with truth as his compass. And from the deepest place in this story, one thing is certain: when a child is truly heard, they can change the world. 1 year after the event that almost shattered everything, Jaden Matthews, the boy who once stood up in the middle of a wedding to stop a tragedy, was now standing at the threshold of a new chapter in his life. On an early autumn morning, as if echoing that same meaningful season, Nathan quietly stood at his son's bedroom door, watching Jaden adjust his tie in the mirror. A white shirt, a gray blazer, hair neatly styled, his face holding just enough seriousness of early adolescence, but still a trace of the innocence of a child. You look just like I did the first time I testified in court, Nathan said with a soft chuckle. Leaning on the doorframe, Jaden glanced at his dad through the mirror, the corner of his mouth lifting in a small smirk. No, Dad, you looked pale as a ghost that day. Me? I'm just a little nervous. Nathan walked in, gently fixing his son's collar. Nervous is good. It reminds us what we're about to do matters. Jaden nodded. Today, he wasn't going to court. He wasn't going to school. Today, he was giving a speech at the launch of the Voices of Childhood initiative, a support network for children who have experienced abuse or neglect in blended families after a parent's remarriage. A program inspired by Jaden's story. When he stepped onto the stage at a large conference center in Georgia, the bright lights made Jaden squint slightly. But he wasn't afraid. In front of hundreds, activists, parents, teachers, reporters, and especially Children sitting in the front row with wide, curious eyes. Jaden began. Someone once asked me, how could an 8-year-old have the courage to stop his father's wedding? I thought about that for a long time. And I realized, it wasn't because I was strong. It was because I had no other choice. I love my dad. And I couldn't let him walk into a wedding that could have turned into a funeral. Asterisk. The room fell silent. Jaden continued, his voice clear, every word delivered from the heart. Adults sometimes forget that kids see more than they think. We hear, we watch, we feel, and we hurt. Just like my dad once didn't see the sadness in my eyes. So many other grown-ups don't see the pain in their children or grandchildren. I don't blame my dad. I just want to remind everyone, ask your kids more than just, are you okay? And when they answer, don't dismiss it so quickly. Asterisk. Applause followed, not loud, but deeply heartfelt. Heads bowed. Some mothers wiped away tears. Nathan, seated in the front row, squeezed his hands together tightly. He didn't cry, but in his eyes, there was an ocean. On the drive home, a light rain began to fall. Nathan drove slowly. Jaden sat quietly, watching raindrops trail down the window. Outside was blurry. But inside his mind, everything was clear. I've been thinking, Jaden spoke. If I wanted to study psychology or law later, would you support me? Nathan smiled. I'll support anything that helps you feel like you can make a difference. Jaden looked at his dad. Then I want to change how people listen to kids. Not because I'm special, but because too many kids aren't believed. They pulled into the driveway. Nathan turned to his son. His gaze steady, honest, nothing like the man who once trusted the wrong smile. Then I promise, until you're old enough to do it yourself, I'll be the first to believe everything you say. That night, Jaden wrote in his journal, a habit he'd kept since the wedding was called off. Today I saw the eyes of a boy in the audience. I don't know his name, but I knew that look. It used to be mine, the day I just wanted to be believed once. If telling my story helps one boy speak up, then maybe what happened that day wasn't meaningless. Jaden closed the notebook. The rain had stopped. A crescent moon peeked through the sky. And in that stillness, one promise echoed softly, but as powerfully as thunder. He would never stay silent if the truth could save someone. We often teach children that honesty is the best policy. But what society rarely prepares for is this. What do we do when the truth comes from the mouth of an 8-year-old? And it's too hard to accept? The case of Jaden Matthews, the boy who stopped his own father's wedding after uncovering a murder plot, is not just a moving story. It is a wake-up call. From the perspective of a child psychologist, I can say this without hesitation. What Jaden went through is not some young hero's legend, as the media has praised. It was a cry for help that had gone unheard too many times. It was the sound of silent knocking, the early cracks in the heart of a child being overlooked by the adults around him. Many children have told me the same thing. I said something, but no one believed me. That chills me more than any crime ever could. Jaden didn't need to be a genius. He didn't need to save anyone to be taken seriously. He just needed one adult brave enough to believe him the first time. But he didn't get that. And millions of other children don't either. What we should take from this story is not just a lesson in bravery, it's a lesson in responsibility. The responsibility of adults, in families, in schools, in communities, when a child expresses fear, doubt, or emotion, when a child says they don't feel safe, we have no right to dismiss it. When a child raises concerns about someone, don't be so quick to label them as jealous, troublesome, or making things up. Look deeper. Ask more. Believe earlier. Jaden prevented a tragedy, something that should never have been placed on the shoulders of an 8-year-old boy. But from that truth, we must ask ourselves, how many children never get the second chance that Jaden and his father did? How many weddings have taken place, hiding unspoken fears behind the smiles? Let me close with a quote I always carry with me in my line of work. When a child tells you what scares them, you have only two choices. Become the safest place they'll ever know, or the reason they never tell the truth again. What we choose defines a child's future.